Okay, yeah, they married someone from another town, big deal. But they kept track of their women, so because their women would marry and then would obviously change their names, but they kept track of who they were with, and they said, for example, they would say, okay, Mrs. Or young, let's say, Vatuhi Tombalian, that's a Gurintsis name, and she married a certain Mr. Bedrossian from Khatbet or some other town. So it would give the name of her husband and the town where her husband was from. And they did this for the US, and they also did this for the Gurintsis who ended up in Argentina, for example. Then it gives a list, but this is, remember, this is 1930, 1933, so those who had come from Gurinta who had already unfortunately passed away. Oh, also a list of the veterans in the Great War. So some of them came here, got their citizenships. Then it was World War I. What did they do? They were sent to fight Germany or perhaps Turkey in the Great War. And I don't have all the issues of that specific collection, but they did this for the Armenians, the Gurintsis in U.S., Argentina, Mexico. I'm sure in the other issues there's also the French, Gurintsis, and the Syrian and Lebanese. I just don't have those issues. Okay, here's something I stole from Mark's talk, and since he didn't have that much time to finish it, I can talk more about it. So this was this wonderful graph that shows how, the red is the women, and so you can see that after the genocide, most people who came, or at least half, but I think it's a little more than half, were women or young women. Before it was almost not exclusively men, but it was the majority were definitely men. Okay, and this kind of, I was happy that Mark got to the point where he was confident enough to produce such a graph, because this basically corresponds to my gut feeling when I read these lists from the Shaman houses. Yeah, that looks exactly right. Another thing I'm stealing from Mark. If I say I'm stealing, am I really stealing it? Okay, so if you remember his point that you have a bunch of people born on the 15th, and it's not something in the water in Armenia, it's just that probably they didn't know, they didn't know when they were born, and so they would put the 15th as a middle date. And same for, that's why the 5th and the 10th and the 25th are somewhat prominent here, because those are round numbers. You also have the 7th, notice, because the week has 7 days, so if you were born in the first week of May, well, May 7th might be a good approximation. Here's confirmation of this that I found in a survivor account. These are the survivor accounts. I believe Tracy mentioned those, the ones from the University of Michigan. And there was a lady there, Asharus Hadidian, and she was from Al-Bustan, another town. And this is what she says in her survivor account. She says, nobody had paid attention to birthdays for me to ask my grandfather when he was born. They would say someone was born when their grapes were cut, or when the wheat was boiled, or that he was born at Easter or Baptanas. But my father was an educated man, and he had written down the exact dates of our births and weddings. Okay, so she happened to know her birthday, but she couldn't tell you what her grandfather's birthday was, because that was just not something. I mean, you have to keep in mind we're 100 years or more than 100 years before, and there wasn't a birthday with presents and a cake, and that just wasn't. That's a very modern thing, right? So people just didn't write down birthdays. Okay, a few case studies now, so from various families. Okay, here's someone from Urfa, not in my family, these are memoirs I found that were published privately by someone called Bedrossian, and I believe he died in the Philadelphia area. He was born, so he says in his memoirs, he says, well, my family was the Kazanjan family. Okay, remember that his name is Bedrossian, not Kazanjan. He says, well, my family was Kazanjan. I have an uncle who was, I forget his first name, but it was a priest, and it was, there was something Kazanjan. But he says, his grandfather was the Bedrossian, and therefore his children took on the name Bedrossian because they were the sons of the Bedros. Okay, so if you know a little bit about the way Armenian families work, you know that this is pretty common. So if you have Ded something, it's, for example, Ded Hagopian is because you have an ancestor who was Ded Hagop, that is father Hagop. Right, so this is pretty standard so far, but he adds an interesting piece of information. He says, we were also known as Keshishian. Okay, and you're like, what? What? And if you know a bit of Turkish, you know that Keshish is the priest. And so Keshishian, the Keshishian family was a nickname for the family. It was the priestly family. There was a priest in the family. Okay, now if you're looking through records, this is really relevant information. You need to be looking for perhaps in one document they are Bedrossian, in another document they are Bedrossian, and in another document they are Keshishian. This is this is a little horrible in some sense, a little frightening. Okay, but it's reality, and you have to work with this. And it's not this again. It's not this particular family that's relevant to you. But what's relevant is the process here, and you got to keep in mind that this may have happened in your family, and probably actually did happen in your family as well. One of the things we often get on the Facebook group is, my family was X, but then I'm told that before that we were Y, and I'm wondering how is this possible, and is this just a family story? No, these are true things, so it makes it more challenging. And that's why you need to, like Martin and Tracy emphasize, you need to multiply the sources, you need to go to censuses, you need to go to ship manifests, you need to go to all these different sources so that you have other information, for example, the age, name of their siblings, and so on, that will help you connect the dots together. Right, so here are a few ways that family names can vary, that Armenian family names can vary. Sometimes family names are first names, in fact. Sometimes it's just phonetic similarity. So Makruhi in Armenian is from Makur, which means clean. But a lot of Makruhis I find in the records translated their name to Margaret. Margaret is from Greek, it means a pearl. It doesn't have anything to do with being clean. But they sound the same. They sound similar. So a lot of Makruhi women translate to Margaret, perhaps to be better integrated because they're tired if they're talking to someone asks them, Mark or what? So they end up just calling me Margaret. Or another example, a lot of Dikrans, because Dikran you can abbreviate it to Dik, and then Dik in English is the abbreviation of Richard, so then a lot of Dikrans become Richards. Okay, but Richard has nothing to do with Dikran, in the meaning of those names historically. Or Araxi becomes Roxy. I've even seen Watertown become Walter. Okay. Another way that a name may be changed is through I'm professionally a linguist, I'm a associate professor of linguistics. Is what we linguists call folk etymology. That is, they look for something in the word that sounds like another word, and then they assume that's the origin of it. So here there's a family called Karagaburian, and that in Turkish means the black devil or something like that. Okay, but maybe they actually knew what it meant. They said, well, we're not going to be called the black devils, but Kara is black in Turkish, but Kara also sounds like the Armenian word kar, which means a stone or a rock, and so they translated their family name to stone. That's so very, very difficult if you don't know this. Sometimes it's true etymology, so there's folk etymology, but there's also true etymology. So Kovanes is in fact the equivalent of John. John's from Johannes. Johannes became Kovanes in Armenian. You can see the similarity there. Or Bedrossian, those are literally the children of Bedros, or the descendants of Bedros, which is Peter. Vakian, and sometimes there's the Ukrainian crisis, we saw a gentleman named Abakov, and I was wondering he's Armenian, in fact he is, he's an Armenian from Baku. Avakian was a family name, but they adapted it, Russianized it, or Ukrainized, adapted it to the Ukrainian, became Abakov. Right? Or the Arabian family that I see a lot in sometimes they're referred to as Araboğlu, which is the Turkish version of Arabia. That means just, again, the descendants of someone who is called Arab. Also sometimes it's abbreviations like Arslan from Arslanian, or Siranosian becomes Siran, and so on. Okay, here's a really interesting example. Is in some of those Hushamadians, I actually found a census that was carried out by the Armenian Church in 1828. And this is, as George was saying, we're told there are no documents. This is not true. There are such things out there. And when I looked, and I transcribed the census that was already published by Father Jemjan in some of these issues over here. And a lot of the names, they were the same in 1828 as they are today, or as they were in 1915 when the unity was dissolved. And here's an interesting case. I just took the first families on the list. So you have, and they were, by neighborhood, so these were neighbors, basically. So you have the Bartavidians, then the Afarians, the Hochuyans, and the Araboğlu or Arabian. Okay. Well, remember, this is in 1828. Then I came across a biography of someone called Vahan Bartavidian, who was in Lebanon, and he was unfortunately murdered when the Armenian community there started organizing himself. There were some feuds between the Tashnags and the Penchags, and this doesn't happen today, obviously, but well, at least people won't get murdered over it. But unfortunately, he got murdered in the feud. But this is what it says. So he was born in Kai City, but he's about Babylon, and his parents were from Gurintsis. Okay, so he may be related to these people here on the census. And what did he do? Well, he moved to Varna in Bulgaria for business, where he married the daughter of Ovanes Kochunian. We're at the end of the 19th century here. And Kochunian's wife was an Arabian. We already have 3 of the 4 names on the beginning of the 1828 census. Half a century later, these people are intermarrying. And not only that, but his daughter in Beirut, in the early 20th century, marries another Gurintsis descendant by the name of Afarian, which is the 4th name at the very beginning of the 1828 census. Over a century, these 4 families stuck together. I mean, that's amazing. They're not my relatives, by the way, so I saw those names, like, wait a second, this is like that. Wow. Okay, another example of a diaspora list. This one is from the Urfa Hushamadian. This is what it looks like, and this is the big book that my grandmother left me. And she said, this belonged to my father. And then I started looking through the book, and there were these marks. I don't know if you can see them here. So if you have some of those in your attic or your basement, keep them and look through them. My great-grandfather had made marks there next to some names. And one thing I noticed through the pages, so this is the list of the surviving Urfatsis, the people from Urfa. And it has, if they were married, it says dead at the beginning, so husband and wife, the number of boys they had, the number of girls, and the last column is the total in the family. But what I noticed was he had made marks next to some names, and a lot of those names were Kapidjan. I was like, Kapidjan? Oh, that's funny. Well, I have a friend who's called that, but why so many Kapidjan? So I asked my grandmother, I said, maybe those were his cousins on his mom's side. And she said, no. She said, I heard that name. She said, we Tenisjans, we were once Kapidjans. And I said, well, okay. I love my grandmother, but her age is not getting any younger. But I apologize to her for when she's watching this, because she turned out to be exactly right. What I learned was from her niece, the other Hatun Tenisjan, that one of the persons I'm dedicating this talk to. She told me, oh yes, I interviewed a lot of the a lot of my grandfather's cousins in the 70s and 80s. And the Temizcan, our family name, comes from Tomisci. And the Tomisci was the Ottoman coffee roaster. And so she said, well, it's Temizcan, but they often alternate in Turkish. We have Armenian instead of Armenian and so on. And so she said some of the branches of the family, they, instead of keeping the name Temizcan, they used kahve, which is coffee, kahveci, so it's the coffee makers. So there you go, it was a translation of the name. It wasn't the same root, but Temizcan and kahveci were the same names, and all the kahvecians in this book that my great-grandfather had made little marks next to, they were independently mentioned by her family story that with the people she interviewed in the 70s and 80s, the survivors she interviewed. So, it was exactly right. Okay, so where do we go from here? I'm sorry, I'm not going to quote an Armenian, but another fellow Montrealer who says, even though basically, you got me singing ever since the river died. You got me thinking of all the places we could hide. You got me singing, even though our world is gone. You got me thinking that I'd like you to carry on. So where do we go from here? What needs to be done is, on the side of the Bushamanians, is more local projects. So with Denis Dersakissian, who's a Gurintsis descendant in France, we started a website on Gurint, and all the documents we could find on Gurint, and translate them if possible, or at least index them. So we need more of those local projects. If you have the time or resource to do this, look in your basement, look in your attic, find those books, have them read before it's too late. Look at the marks that your grandparents made on them. Perhaps you will find something. We need re-editing of the Bushamanians. Some of them are currently being re-edited out of Antelias. You can try to get copies of your own. We need transcriptions and translations of survivor accounts. I've heard many times, oh yeah, my mom or my grandma, she told her story, and we recorded it, but it's on the tape. Well, that tape, won't last forever. Digitize it, make it available, share it, put it online, or give it to an institute who has the capability to do so. And create indexes again of those documents. And then once we have all this, what we can do is do like what Mark has been doing with the American records is link the names from one database to another, so we have everything concerning a given individual centralized. There's a lot of people to thank. I won't read all of their names to you, but specifically if you're in town, if you live in the Boston area, or if you're visiting and you have some time, two places you can go, and two places that have helped me a lot in my own personal research, but that could probably help you in yours. NAASR in Vermont, that's the National Association for Armenian Research, Armenian Studies and Research, NAASR, NAASR.org. Mark Montgomery here is the director, and there's a lot of very helpful people. They have a wonderful library with a lot of those Bushamanians, so if you don't have them in your basement or attic, you may find them there, and they have very competent people on site, who can help you at least get you started, find the right one for your family. They won't do your genealogy for you, but they'll guide you to what you need to find. And another place is at the American Museum in Watertown. They have a smaller library, and you have to make an appointment. NAASR is just open 9 to 5 every weekday. But in the one in Watertown, they also have other things that NAASR may not have. So, for example, in my case, they had the archives of the Compatriotic Union of Gurint. So it had letters from all over the diaspora of people who wrote to the Union throughout the decades. And this is a photo of Gurintsis survivors in Yerevan in the 20s or 30s. And this is for what's left to be done is the third wave of immigration to the U.S. are the people who came after the breakup of the Soviet Union. And there are documents there. We need people to connect to them to know what they have that we don't have access to. And so there were also Gurintsis descendants in the Soviet Union. Where are they now? Do they still remember who, what documents they have? There's still a lot to find out.
So, thank you, Luke. Your comments at the end, perfect segue into a few items to note. There will be, we have a few minutes for questions for Luke. So, again, unfortunately, you're going to have to come up here. But if you do have a couple of questions, maybe you can just, we have time for maybe two or three. If 2 or 3 people want to walk up and ask their questions, they can do so over here or that way, whichever side is easy. So he mentioned NAASR, which is National Association for Armenian Studies and Research. They're in Concord Ave, Belmont. They're one of the co-sponsors of this conference today, along with the others that you can find on the website, which include Project Save, the Armenian Museum of America, which is in Watertown, which is the museum Luke mentioned as well. The Takayan Foundation and the Hamaskayan Foundation are also co-sponsors. I may be forgetting somebody, but if I am, I apologize. But clearly on our website, we mentioned the people that are that believe in this sort of work. And as part of that, well, Project Save has a table in the back today, so feel free to stop by and learn more about them there. But as well, tomorrow at NAASR first at 1 o'clock, we're having an open house where they can talk to their, speak to their library, the resources they have. Their bookstore hopefully will be open as well, where you can purchase. They have the largest selection of books about Armenians in English that you can always stop in their bookstore as well. A lot of these village histories that have been translated are available. So that's at 1 o'clock tomorrow, and I encourage you to come. Everybody's free to attend that. It's a free open house where they're going to tell you a little bit about their mission. Following that at 2 o'clock, we're going to be going to the Armenian Museum, where the museum will be open for those that want to tour the museum. And while that's going on, groups of 8 to 10 people will be going up to Project Save to view their archives, see the database they have, which is very useful for genealogists as well, because the photographs that they are archiving there have a wealth of information about the people in there, genealogical information. About the people that are in the photographs, where they were taken, the background of those people. So you'll learn more about Project Save tomorrow as well as being able to hear about the museum and their library there. So that was a good segue into that sort of thing. I guess without further, I will mention one thing to layer in, another point to add into what Luke said, and this is probably as good a time as any, is that you've heard a lot about the Ottoman census records and the transcribing that's been going on with those records. There is a project particular to Istanbul or Bolis, Constantinople, that's being done by a group in Turkey. You can leave it on, Roger, it's fine. I'm not going to show the slides, I'll just talk about it. And what they're doing is they are transcribing both Ottoman census records and also Armenian records, which include census information about the Armenians from a later time period than what's offered in the Ottoman census record. So it's very fascinating stuff. I do have some of the material here if you're interested to know what their project is about, the people that are working on it.